Hi again then guys, and welcome to another look back into the world of DRIVECLUB, a very popular world, especially now that it's not available anymore. That tends to be the rule of supply and demand. Take something away and people tend to like it more. But this particular vehicle is probably one of the less exciting, you could say, of the car list. Not that it's a bad car in any way, it's actually a very good one, but I've personally found, and I'd be interested to know if you guys consider this to be similar, or maybe if there are other examples you can think of as well, where I would liken the evolution and the generations and the facelift changes of the Audi R8 from its inception in around 2007 with that original 4.2 litre, which is incidentally still my favourite version of it, up until now, to be very similar to that of the Bugatti Veyron. And the reason why I liken them to each other is very simple. Both vehicles burst onto the scene with a ton of fanfare, a lot of immediate fans of this new, fresh idea from a brand that hadn't really done something quite like this before, and yet the vehicle over time kind of suffers from this familiarity breeds contempt mentality, which the Nissan GT-R is beginning to fall into as well, where when you've had a vehicle, especially a base model that gets facelifted, etc. over time, it's very easy to become complacent about that and to get used to it, and it becomes somehow less special. Now, generally, that doesn't apply to a supercar, because a supercar will usually have its run, it might have a special version or versions released, but then it pretty much ends. Think of some examples. The SLR. It had a couple of different variants, and then it went away and made way for the SLS. The Porsche Carrera GT. There was one variation, then it went away, and then the 918 Spider came along. Unfortunately, the Veyron and the Audi R8 and a couple of others, they kind of do. They get stretched and redesigned and redeveloped so many times that over time they just don't have the impact that they originally did anymore. And I would actually argue that that phenomenon, if you will, can be very clearly seen with this particular version of the R8 in particular, because even though it has the V10 engine, it's got 20 horsepower more than its predecessor, it weighs 50 kilos less than the V10 did before it, and yet it's probably the easiest version of the Audi R8 to forget about. Because although it was technically better, and it had a slight redesign, the headlights in particular, slightly different shaped front end, and yet it's not different enough. Almost like what Lamborghini did with the Gallardo when they changed it to the LP560. A great car, but it felt kind of long in the tooth after only a couple of years, if that. That kind of has happened for me with the R8. Now, the more recent redesign was much more radical, and it kind of bumped it up a little bit, kind of like Bugatti did, changing the Veyron into the Chiron, where it still has the same underpinnings, but it's different enough. The problem for this particular R8, though, is it's not different enough. It does have more power, it does have less weight, but it's just not radically different enough to the previous one for it to be memorable, or at least I would argue. Now, the newer R8 does, but even in the game, what can this one actually do? Well, it actually does offer a lot. It's similar, of course, to the Gallardo. They have the same underpinnings, that 542 horsepower V10. It's got all the power you'd need from a car of its type. It's not overly heavy, even though it's luxurious and all-wheel drive, and it's the kind of car that if you do choose to use it in the game, it will serve you well. It's kind of like a GT-R, or even any of the other R8s for that matter. It's very good across the board. Top speed, acceleration, handling, grip. It is an impressive car. It's a capable one. It's just a car that's kind of getting long in the tooth at this point, and at this point in particular, around 2012, you could definitely feel that. But that's it overall for my thoughts on the R8 V10 Plus. Of course, I'll see you next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.